One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. Music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety to life and to everything. Good people do not need laws to tell them to act responsibly, while bad people will find a way around the laws. Love is a serious mental disease. The greatest wealth is to live content with little. Democracy is a charming form of government, full of variety and disorder, and dispensing a sort of equality to equals and unequals alike. The beginning is the most important part of the work. The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. To be conquered by yourself is of all things most shameful and vile. Dictatorship naturally rises out of democracy, and the most aggravated form of tyranny, and slavery out of the most extreme liberty. Human behavior flows from three main sources: desire, emotion, and knowledge. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when the measure of a man is what he does with power. We are twice armed if we fight with faith. For a man to conquer himself is the first and noblest of all victories. The empty vessel makes the loudest sound. A good decision is based on knowledge and not on numbers. No man should bring children into the world who is unwilling to persevere to the end in their nature and education. People are like dirt. They can either nourish you and help you grow as a person, or they can stunt your growth and make you wilt and die. Courage is knowing what not to fear. A hero is born among 100, a wise man is found among 1,000, that an accomplished one might not be found even among 100,000 men. Ignorance, the root and stem of all evil. Every heart sings a song and complete until another heart whispers back. Those who wish to sing always find a song. At the touch of a lover, everyone becomes a poet. This city is what it is because our citizens are what they are. Thinking, the talking of the soul with itself. At the touch of love, everyone becomes a poet. When men speak ill of thee, live so as nobody may believe them. There are two things a person should never be angry at: what they can help and what they cannot. Music is the movement of sound to reach the soul for the education of its virtue. Honesty is for the most part less profitable than dishonesty. There are three classes of men: lovers of wisdom, lovers of honor, and lovers of gain. Death is not the worst that can happen to men. Nothing in the affairs of men is worthy of great anxiety. The direction in which education starts a man will determine his future in life. Science is nothing but perception. Astronomy compels the soul to look upwards and leads us from this world to another. Justice in the life and conduct of the state is possible only as first it resides in the hearts and souls of the citizens. All men are by nature equal, made all of the same earth, by one workman, and however we deceive ourselves, as dear unto God as the poor peasant, as the mighty prince. Poetry is nearer to vital truth than history. Necessity, the mother of invention. The eyes of the soul of the multitudes are unable to endure the vision of the divine. No one is a friend to his friend who does not love in return. Let parents bequeath to their children not riches, but the spirit of reverence. When the mind is thinking, it is talking to itself. He who commits injustice is ever made more wretched than he who suffers it. There is no harm in repeating a good thing. Love is the joy of the good, the wonder of the wise, the amazement of the gods. He who is of calm and happy nature will hardly feel the pressure of age, but to him who is of an opposite disposition, youth and age are equally a burden. Justice means minding one's own business and not meddling with other men's concerns. Knowledge becomes evil if the aim be not virtuous. If a man neglects education, he walks lame to the end of his life. There is a victory and defeat, the first and best of victories, the lowest and worst of defeats which each man gains or sustains at the hands not of another, but of himself. Better a little which is well done than a great deal imperfectly. Rhetoric is the art of ruling the minds of men. The man who makes everything that leads to happiness depends upon himself and not upon other men, has adopted the very best plan for living happily. This is the man of moderation, the man of manly character and of wisdom. To be sure I must, and therefore I may assume that your silence gives consent. The God of love lives in a state of need. It is a need. It is an urge. It is a homeostatic imbalance, like hunger and thirst. It's almost impossible to stamp out. The punishment which the wise suffer, who refuse to take part in the government, is to live under the government of worse men. Attention to health is life's greatest hindrance. No one ever teaches well who wants to teach, or governs well who wants to govern. The learning and knowledge that we have is, at the most, but little compared with that of which we are ignorant. Knowledge which is acquired under compulsion obtains no hold on the mind. No one ever teaches well who wants to teach, or governs well who wants to govern. To suffer the penalty of too much haste, which is too little speed. Must not all things at the last be swallowed up in death? And what, Socrates, is the food of the soul? Surely, I said, knowledge is the food of the soul. The most virtuous are those who content themselves with being virtuous without seeking to appear so. Poets utter great and wise things which they do not themselves understand. As the builders say, the larger stones do not lie well without the lesser. Tyranny naturally rises out of democracy. The rulers of the state are the only persons who ought to have the privilege of lying, either at home or abroad. They may be allowed to lie for the good of the state. Ignorance of all things is an evil neither terrible nor excessive, nor yet the greatest of all, but great cleverness and much learning, if they be accompanied by a bad training, are much greater misfortune. We do not learn, and what we call learning is only a process of recollection. Entire ignorance is not so terrible or extreme an evil, and is far from being the greatest of all. Too much cleverness and too much learning, accompanied with ill bringing up, are far more fatal. This and no other is the root from which a tyrant springs. When he first appears, he is a protector. When there is an income tax, the just man will pay more and the unjust less on the same amount of income. We ought to fly away from earth to heaven as quickly as we can, and to fly our ways to become like God as far as this is possible, and to become like Him is to become holy, just, and wise. Philosophy begins in wonder. He who is not a good servant will not be a good master. Courage is a kind of salvation. Those who intend on becoming great should love neither themselves nor their own things, but only what is just, whether it happens to be done by themselves or others. To love rightly is to love what is orderly and beautiful, in an educated and disciplined way. Twice and thrice over, as they say, good is it to repeat and review what is good. Wonder is the feeling of the philosopher, and philosophy begins in wonder. Truth is the beginning of every good to the gods, and of every good to man. He who steals a little steals with the same wish as he who steals much but with less power. The blame is his who chooses. God is blameless. Man, a being in search of meaning. I never did anything worth doing by accident, nor did any of my inventions come by accident. They came by work. To prefer evil to good is not in human nature, and when a man is compelled to choose one of two evils, no one will choose the greater, when he might have the less. Knowledge without justice ought to be called cunning, rather than wisdom. Democracy passes into despotism. Excess of liberty, whether it lies in state or individuals, seems only to pass into excess of slavery. The wisest have the most authority. Wisdom alone is the science of other sciences. Apply yourself both now and in the next life without effort. You cannot be prosperous, though the land be good. You cannot have an abundant crop without cultivation. Any man may easily do harm, but not every man can do good to another. For the introduction of a new kind of music must be shunned, as imperiling the whole state, since styles of music are never disturbed without affecting the most important political institutions. Knowledge is true opinion. Excess generally causes reaction, and produces a change in the opposite direction, whether it be in the seasons, or in individuals, or in governments. It is clear to everyone that astronomy, at all events, compels the soul to look upwards and draws it from the things of this world to the other. Whatever deceives men seems to produce a magical enchantment. It is a common saying, and in everybody's mouth, that life is but a sojourn. Not to help justice in her need would be an impiety. No law or ordinance is mightier than understanding. A state arises, as I conceive, out of the needs of mankind. No one is self-sufficing, but all of us have many wants. It is right to give every man his due. The excessive increase of anything causes a reaction in the opposite direction. The curse of me and my nation is that we always think things can be bettered by immediate action of some sort, any sort rather than no sort. Man is a wingless animal with 2 feet and flat nails. No one knows whether death, which people fear to be the greatest evil, may not be the greatest good. No evil can happen to a good man, either in life or after death. The most important part of education is proper training in the nursery. If particulars are to have meaning, there must be universals. Philosophy is the highest music. There must always remain something that is antagonistic to good. Our object in the construction of the state is the greatest happiness of the whole, and not that of any one class. How can you prove whether at this moment we are sleeping, and all our thoughts are a dream, or whether we are awake and talking to one another in the waking state? They certainly give very strange names to diseases. I exhort you also to take part in the great combat, which is the combat of life, and greater than every other earthly conflict. The community which has neither poverty nor riches will always have the noblest principles. I have hardly ever known a mathematician who was capable of reasoning. Then not only an old man, but also a drunkard becomes a second time a child. There is no such thing as a lover's oath. Wealth is well known to be a great comforter. No trace of slavery ought to mix with the studies of the freeborn man. No study pursued under compulsion remains rooted in the memory. One man cannot practice many arts with success. To go to the world below, having a soul which is like a vessel full of injustice, is the last and worst of all the evils. The highest reach of injustice is to be deemed just when you are not. States are as the men, they grow out of human characters. Virtue is relative to the actions and ages of each of us in all that we do. Injustice is censured because the censors are afraid of suffering and not from any fear which they have of doing injustice. When a benefit is wrongly conferred, the author of the benefit may often be said to injure. We ought to esteem it of the greatest importance, that the fictions which children first hear should be adapted in the most perfect manner to the promotion of virtue. Man never legislates, but destinies and accidents, happening in all sorts of ways, legislate in all sorts of ways. The God's service is tolerable, man's intolerable. I would fain grow old, learning many things. Hardly any human being is capable of pursuing to professions or to arts rightly. Then not only custom, but also nature affirms that to do is more disgraceful than to suffer injustice, and that justice is equality.